I don't care what anyone says, games aren't just getting worse, they're rotting. I realized it the night I booted up something mindless, a quick distraction before bed. Just another glossy title from a studio that used to mean something. The kind of game where every animation is smooth, every texture polished, every character so lifelessly perfect it feels more like a showroom than a world. I wasn't expecting much. I wasn't looking for horror, but something in it looked back at me. At first, it was nothing more than a pause in the character's idle animation. You know how NPCs just loop the same 3 movements? This one didn't. He turned. Just slightly. Too smooth, too natural, like a human finally breaking out of autopilot. His eyes locked onto mine. Not onto the camera. Not onto the generic player model I controlled, but through the screen itself at me. I laughed, brushed it off. Maybe the devs patched in some kind of creepy Easter egg, but then he whispered my name. Not my username, my real name. Low, distorted, almost drowned out by the sound design, but it was there. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just another lazy cash grab. Something was happening to the games themselves. People complain all the time about DLC, paywalls, broken launches. Sure, those things make games worse. But what I've seen, it goes deeper than greedy studios. It's like there's rot spreading through the code, infection bleeding into the worlds we spend hours inside, and nobody wants to talk about it. I do, because I've seen proof. I've seen levels no one was supposed to load into, patches that update themselves even when the servers are down, characters breaking the script just to say things they shouldn't know. Games aren't just declining in quality, they're changing in ways that shouldn't be possible. And here's the part that should scare you. Once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Every flicker in a texture, every stutter in an audio file, every strange phrase in an NPC's dialogue feels like a clue, a warning, a message meant only for you. I think the only way I can explain what's happening is to start with what it used to feel like. Back when games weren't infected, back when they were simple, almost clumsy things, but honest in a way that doesn't exist anymore. I grew up with cartridges you had to blow into just to get them to start, with discs that scratched if you so much as looked at them the wrong way. Back then, glitches were part of the charm. A character's arm would twist into spaghetti, or your car would shoot 50 feet into the sky because of a collision bug. You'd laugh, maybe tell your friends at school, and that was the end of it. It was human error, messy coding, the fingerprints of people who built worlds with limited tools. And yet those worlds felt alive. A little pixelated character in an underpowered console could spark more emotion than all the photorealistic, billion-dollar releases we get now. I can still remember sitting cross-legged on the carpet, holding a plastic controller that felt like it might snap in half if I pressed too hard, staring at a screen where the sky was made of 3 repeating shades of blue, and feeling wonder. Compare that to now. AAA titles that launch broken, riddled with bugs that aren't funny anymore, just infuriating. Whole games carved into pieces, sold back to you as deluxe editions. NPCs so scripted they feel like mannequins on rails, while players pretend this is the pinnacle of immersion. It's not. It's empty. It's soulless. But that's the thing, most people stop there. They think the problem is greed or incompetence or a lack of creativity. That's only the surface. Underneath, something else is festering. I didn't notice it right away. At first, I was just another bitter player, nostalgic for the so-called golden age. I'd rant online, talk about how nothing would ever beat the games of my childhood. Maybe you've done the same. Maybe you felt that same ache when you fire up a modern release and realize you don't feel anything anymore. But one night, I can't even remember which game it was, just another disposable title, I noticed something strange. Not a bug, not a glitch. It was too deliberate. The shadows moved in a way that wasn't mapped to the light source. An NPC turned their head at the wrong moment, like they'd been waiting for me specifically. There was no broken charm in it, no human fingerprint. It felt intentional, and once I saw it, I started noticing more. Games whispering in ways they shouldn't. Animations lingering for a fraction of a second too long. Files on my hard drive changing even when I hadn't touched the controller. That's when I realized nostalgia wasn't just a longing for the past. It was a contrast, a reminder of how far things had decayed. The old games were flawed, but they were real. These new ones, they're something else. Hollow, uncanny, rotten. I know what you're thinking. Everyone complains about games. Everyone says things aren't like they used to be. But I'm not just complaining. I have proof, and if you're still listening, maybe you want to see it. Maybe you're ready to understand. Because the truth is, the decay isn't random. It's spreading. And if you think it's just about bad business practices or lazy developers, you're not seeing the bigger picture. The games are changing because something is changing them, and I can prove it. But to do that, I need to tell you about the first time it made itself known. The first time I saw the rot behind the code. The first incident. The first time I knew something was seriously wrong. It started with a patch note. You know how it goes. You boot up a game you haven't touched in weeks, and before you can even hit start, it forces you to download some massive update. 10 gigabytes of bug fixes and minor improvements, which always means new microtransactions, another skin nobody asked for, maybe a few balance tweaks that ruin the character you actually liked. This one looked no different. The game was a big online shooter, the kind with a player base obsessed with stats and kill-death ratios. I hadn't logged in since launch, but I figured why not? Maybe it would distract me for an hour. The patch notes were strange, shorter than usual and written differently. Instead of the usual corporate tone, adjusted weapon damage, fixed collision issues. It was blunt, almost hostile. Lines like removed unnecessary variables, corrected behavior, replaced defective assets. I stared at the screen, confused. It sounded less like a developer writing for players and more like, I don't know, like the game was updating itself. Still, I shrugged it off. I hit play. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Menu music, normally this upbeat electronic loop, was gone. In its place was silence, except for a low, almost imperceptible hum. Not static, not feedback. More like the sound of a refrigerator in another room. Always there, but too quiet to pinpoint. Then I loaded into a match. At first, everything looked fine. Same maps, same gun models, same over-designed characters. But the colors felt off, like someone had dragged the saturation bar just slightly below 0. Grays bled into blacks. Reds looked too deep, too heavy. The whole map felt darker, even though the lighting engine was supposed to be unchanged. And then came the whisper. It wasn't over my headset. My mic was unplugged. It wasn't in the in-game chat either. It was in the game itself. An NPC, background filler in the spawn area, one of those pointless soldiers you're not supposed to interact with, turned his head just slightly. Just enough for me to notice. And in a voice pitched low, distorted through the sound design, he said my name. Not my gamer tag. My real name. I froze. My first instinct was to think, no way. I imagined that. But the sound design didn't glitch. My audio didn't stutter. It was deliberate. And when I circled back, pretending to check my loadout, the NPC was staring directly at me. Not at my character. At me. The match started before I could process it. Other players ran forward, bullets flying, explosions shaking the map. But I just stood there staring at the soldier in the spawn zone. He never moved. His animation cycle didn't reset. He just stayed locked on me, watching. When the match ended, I checked the patch notes again. The list was gone, completely replaced by a single line, corrected user. That's when the fear set in. I told myself it was just a bug. Maybe some bored developer inserted an Easter egg. Maybe the sound file glitched and combined phonemes into something resembling my name. It happens, right? That's what I wanted to believe, but then I checked the forums. Nobody else mentioned it. Not a single post about the weird patch notes or the missing music or the NPC that spoke. Players argued about gun balance, skins, cosmetics, business as usual. I scrolled for hours, convinced someone else had seen it. Nothing. That's when it hit me. It was only happening to me. I uninstalled the game thinking that would be the end of it. But the next day my console turned itself on. I woke up to the sound of the menu hum echoing through my living room. No controller input, no power button pressed, it just woke up. And on the screen the game was reinstalling itself. Not downloading, not patching, just appearing, percentage by percentage, as if the console already had the files hidden inside it. When it finished, the patch notes were back. Another single line, observed behavior. I didn't touch it after that. Not for a while. I shut down the console, unplugged it, shoved it in a closet like that would stop whatever was happening. But deep down, I knew. You can't just delete something like that. If a game wants you, it finds you. That was the first time I noticed the rot. After that night, I couldn't play games the same way. Every time I picked one up, even something I'd trusted for years, I felt myself waiting for it to happen again. And it did, just not the way I expected. At first it was subtle. A character model lingering too long after a cutscene, like their eyes were following me instead of fading into the scripted animation. Menus that flickered for a second, almost too fast to notice, showing options that shouldn't exist. Debug mode, internal user tracking. They'd vanish as quickly as they appeared, like the game was testing me, teasing me. But soon, the glitches stopped being in-game. They started talking back. One night I was playing an old single-player RPG. I knew this game inside out. It was the kind of thing I'd replay once a year for nostalgia's sake. The towns, the quests, the dialogue, I had it all memorized. But this time, when I entered the first village, the NPC who was supposed to give me a standard line about dangerous times ahead said something else entirely. He looked at my character, then directly at the camera. His voice, normally cheerful, dipped into something almost human. "Why are you still here?" he asked. I dropped the controller. I waited for the line to repeat, for the glitch to reset itself. But he didn't move. He didn't cycle back to his idle animation. He just stood there, his mouth slightly open, eyes locked to mine. And then the game crashed. When I rebooted, the save file was gone. Wiped clean, but in its place was a new file I hadn't created. Just a single word for the save name, stay. I didn't play that one again. It wasn't just that game either. Across genres, across consoles, even across decades, the pattern followed me. Horror titles, shooters, puzzle games, it didn't matter. They all bled into the same corruption. In a racing game, I drove off the map by accident and expected to reset back on the track. Instead, the world stretched into a black void, endless, with my car driving forward forever. And then way in the distance, I saw something standing. A human silhouette, impossibly tall, just waiting at the horizon. In a platformer, I clipped through a wall and landed in a space I wasn't supposed to reach. Normally, you'd expect a bland, textureless cube. But this place, it was wrong. The geometry twisted like an Escher painting. Stairs looping into themselves, doors leading nowhere. And all along the walls, distorted faces stretched out like wallpaper, frozen in silent screams. Even multiplayer wasn't safe. Once, while testing a beta build with friends, my game chat activated by itself. I heard breathing in my headset, slow and uneven, like someone standing in the room behind me. My friends swore they didn't hear it. When I muted the chat, the sound kept going. It was as if the games weren't just breaking, they were aware. Aware of me. aware of the fact that I kept playing, testing, pushing against the cracks in the code. The scariest part wasn't the glitches themselves. It was how personal they felt. Every strange occurrence lined up too perfectly with me, my habits, my life. Like when a puzzle game used my actual birthday as the solution to a lock, or when a fighting game generated a random opponent that looked exactly like me, down to the scar on my lip from when I was a kid. I tried showing people, of course. I took screenshots, video clips, even streamed once to prove it wasn't in my head. But here's the thing, none of it came through. When I shared the clips, they looked normal. The NPCs delivered their regular lines. The menus displayed the same options everyone else saw. The faces on the walls? Gone. I'd show a friend, swear up and down about what I'd seen, only for them to shake their head and laugh. Man, you need to get more sleep. That's when it hit me. Whatever was happening, it was meant for me. For my eyes only. I started to wonder if it was some kind of punishment, or maybe a test. The games weren't breaking randomly. They were trying to tell me something, to see how far I'd go, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more persistent it became. Menace glitching with my real name. Difficulty settings labeled with words like compliance and resistance. Loading screens that wouldn't advance until I whispered a phrase out loud like the mic was listening. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself it wasn't real. But that was before I found the others. I thought I was losing my mind. For weeks I kept my mouth shut, telling myself it was stress, exhaustion, or just the kind of paranoia that comes from playing too late at night. But deep down I knew. I knew the games were changing in ways I couldn't explain. And then I found the others. It started on a late-night rabbit hole. Just me, a half-empty soda, and a desperate search history. I typed in phrases like NPC called my name bug and patch notes weird language. At first it was the usual. Tech support threads, Reddit posts with clueless replies, YouTube videos mocking people who believed in haunted games. But buried deep on the third or fourth page of search results, there was a link to a forum I'd never heard of. The URL was nonsense. A jumble of letters and numbers. The banner at the top read, Patch Watch. The threads were messy, chaotic, posted by usernames that looked randomly generated like GlitchEater093 and Annal Reference. But the content? It was exactly what I'd been experiencing. One user described how their racing game had generated a track that was just endless black space, with faint human shapes scattered along the horizon. Another swore their puzzle game used their birthday as a solution to a lock. Someone else claimed they'd been locked out of their save file until they whispered into their mic. It was all there. Every single thing I'd seen, written by strangers scattered across the world. And the scariest part? None of their screenshots showed what they described either. Just like mine, I spent hours reading, eyes burning from the glow of the monitor. Post after post of whispered panic. People too afraid to tell their friends, too afraid of sounding insane. They called it the rot, the same word I'd been thinking all along. One thread in particular stuck with me. The patch that wasn't it doesn't come from the devs. It comes from somewhere else. It crawls into the code and rewrites things. If you see patch notes with phrases like corrected behavior, shut the game off. Delete it if you can, but it never really goes away. There were hundreds of replies, stories of consoles turning on by themselves, hidden menus with options like obey and deny, save files replaced with single words like stay or hurry. People swore they'd seen NPCs mimic them perfectly, down to real-world scars and injuries. One user, Nullpatch, claimed to have beaten it. That's how they phrased it. I reached the end of the metagame. I saw the route, but they never explained how. Their last post was just 3 words, don't look deeper. And then their account vanished. Deleted. Not just their posts, but every trace of them. Replies quoted things that weren't there anymore. Conversations suddenly gutted. It was like the person had never existed. That should have been my warning. But instead, it hooked me. I made an account. I posted my own story about the NPC whispering my real name, about the patch notes that read, "Corrected user." The replies came fast. Dozens of them. Yeah, I've had that too. Watch for the next line. It's always observed behavior. Don't ignore it. Once it knows you, it doesn't stop. One user DM'd me. Their name was just Root. They told me they'd been tracking these changes across dozens of titles, across decades of gaming history. They said the same patterns were in arcade cabinets from the 80s, cartridge-based games from the 90s, even bootleg ROMs floating online. Different hardware, different developers, different genres, but the same signs. The same rot. I asked them what it was. A virus? A hacker collective? Some kind of ARGI? Their reply was instant. Not a virus. Not human. Think of it like an infection. And we're the host. I didn't know what to make of that. But the more I read, the more the pieces lined up. Threads about games whispering personal details they shouldn't know. About multiplayer lobbies filling with usernames that matched dead relatives. About consoles that kept reinstalling the same title no matter how many times it was deleted. And then there were the ones who'd gone too far. People who tried to force the rot into showing itself. They'd hack game files, data mine for hidden content, mess with the code. At first, they'd post excitedly, sharing screenshots of weird debug menus, textures that didn't belong. But then their accounts would go silent. Sometimes the last thing they posted was just a single corrupted image. The community developed an unspoken rule: never dig too deep. They said if you try to rip it apart, it notices you faster, and when it notices, it doesn't stop. That should have scared me away. But it didn't. It fascinated me. Because if this was real, if games were being altered by something no one could explain, then maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe there really was proof, and I wanted that proof. The more I engaged, the more I felt like the games were watching me back. Menace flickered when I logged onto the forum. Save files appeared with the same words I'd read in posts. It was as if my games were syncing with the stories, bleeding into them. And then one night, while scrolling through threads about hidden levels, I got another DM. Not from Root. This one was from a user named DevTest0. The message just said, "You're ready to see it." Attached was a file, and that's how I found the proof. The file was small, barely a few megabytes. Too small to be anything meaningful. That's what I told myself as I stared at it, cursor hovering over the download button. Every instinct screamed that it was bait. But curiosity has a way of sounding like hunger when you've starved yourself long enough. I clicked. The download finished instantly. No progress bar, no wait, just there. A single executable file. Its name was patch0.hidden.exe. I shouldn't have opened it. God, I know that now. But I couldn't resist. My pulse hammered as the screen went black for a moment, then flickered back with a simple blank launcher. No menu, no music, no studio logo. Just plain text across the center. Verifying user. Then, after a pause, user recognized. I didn't even have a controller plugged in. Still, the game, or whatever it was, loaded. It looked like a platformer at first. Old school, pixel graphics, the kind you'd find on a dusty cartridge from the early 90s. A little character stood at the edge of a cliff. He had no face, no features, just a white outline blinking against the void. A prompt flashed and I pressed start, but I hadn't touched anything. My keyboard was across the desk. My controller sat untouched. The character moved anyway. He stepped forward onto the cliff's edge, and then he fell. The screen scrolled down as he plunged into the dark. Platforms passed by. Impossible shapes built from half-rendered textures. Corridors twisted into each other, leading nowhere. Sprites bled into static. It didn't feel like a game. It felt like a graveyard of forgotten levels, stitched together from code that wasn't supposed to be seen. I leaned closer, transfixed. The faceless character landed in a chamber filled with doors. Each one looked different. Some wood, some iron, some glowing faintly with colors that seemed wrong, like shades I'd never seen before. Overhead, in dripping red text, the word choose. I hesitated. I had no input, no control, but the character didn't wait. He walked to one of the doors on his own, and that's when I noticed it. Each door had a name scratched across it. Not usernames, not developer tags, real names, human names. I recognized one immediately. My name. It was scrawled across the third door from the left, jagged, uneven, like it had been carved in with a knife. The character paused in front of it, head tilting as if waiting for me. My chest tightened. I wanted to quit out, close the game, rip the cord from the wall, but my hands wouldn't move. It was like the chair had swallowed me whole. The door creaked open. The level beyond wasn't pixel art anymore. It was photorealistic, grainy, VHS filtered like old found footage. A hallway stretched forward, lined with peeling wallpaper. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing in a way that made my teeth hurt. And I knew it. It was my apartment hallway. Every detail matched, from the dented baseboard near the bathroom to the uneven paint stroke near my front door. Except the photographs on the wall weren't mine. They were wrong. I leaned in. Every picture showed me, sitting at my desk, walking outside, sleeping in my bed. Dozens of snapshots of me, all taken from impossible angles. The faceless character trudged forward, and with each step the lights overhead popped and died. The buzzing grew louder, static weaving into the sound until it almost drowned out my heartbeat. At the end of the hallway was another door. Plain, wooden, unremarkable, but my gut knew. Behind that door was something I wasn't supposed to see. The character reached for the handle. That was when the screen glitched. It didn't just flicker, it tore. The pixels stretched, bleeding across my monitor, filling it with jagged fragments of images. A face blinked into existence. Not a drawn one, not a sprite. An actual human face, distorted by compression as if someone had filmed it through a low-quality webcam. And it was staring at me. Lips moved, though no sound came. The silence was worse than any scream. My speakers hissed with faint static, and then a whisper slipped through. "You shouldn't be here." The game crashed to black. For a long time, I just sat there, my own reflection staring back from the dead monitor. My skin felt clammy, my heartbeat thudding like a drumline inside my skull. But the silence didn't last. The executable relaunched itself. This time there was no menu, no character, just text. Bold and cold. Observed behavior. Curiosity. Corrected behavior. Continued. And then the final line appeared. You have seen the proof. The game closed on its own. I staggered back from the desk. Every instinct telling me to delete it, to wipe the hard drive, to burn the damn computer if I had to. But when I opened my files, the executable was gone. Not just gone, replaced. A new folder sat in its place, untitled, its icon a warped, twisting spiral. Inside were screenshots. All of them were from my webcam. Shots of me staring at the screen, taken while I was playing. One of them was from just a second ago, hand still frozen on the mouse. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just code. It wasn't just a glitch, something was watching, and I wasn't the only one it had chosen. After that night, I couldn't tell where the game ended and my life began. At first, I thought the screenshots were the worst of it. Dozens of images of me, captured without permission, proof that something inside the machine was watching. But it didn't stop there. Every game I touched after that felt tainted, like the infection had spread, not just through the files on my hard drive, but through me. I loaded up an old favorite, one of those comfort titles I'd played since childhood. The kind of game I could beat blindfolded. I thought maybe nostalgia would ground me, but the moment I opened my save file, I knew it was wrong. My character's name had changed, not to a random word, not to gibberish. It was my full name, first, middle, last, typed out perfectly, as though the game knew me better than I knew myself. I stared at it for a long time before pressing continue. The world looked the same at first. Familiar towns, the same old NPCs. But then I noticed little things. Street signs that displayed my birthday, posters on walls with my address. And then when I entered the town square, I saw him. An NPC identical to me. Same clothes I was wearing in real life, same scar on my lip. He stood in the crowd, unmoving, staring at my character. And when I tried to approach, the crowd shifted. Not naturally. Not like AI pathing. It was like the entire crowd closed in around him, shielding him, forcing me away. I quit out immediately. But it followed me. In a multiplayer lobby, usernames started matching the names of my friends, even friends who hadn't played in years. I messaged one of them to ask if they were back online, and they swore they hadn't touched the game. But their username kept appearing, always in the opposing team, always moving like they already knew where I was hiding. Sometimes the enemies didn't even shoot. They just stood there aiming their weapons at me, staring. It was worse in single player. I opened a puzzle game one night, something calming, something slow. But when I reached the first lock, the code wasn't random. It was my phone number, and the game wouldn't advance until I typed it in. That's when I started unplugging everything. Console, PC, router. I yanked every cord out of the wall, convinced it would stop. For a while I felt safe, but the silence didn't last. Because even without the machines, I started hearing things. I'd walk past my TV, completely powered off, and swear I heard a menu hum beneath the static. I'd lie in bed and catch whispers of my name, the exact same distorted cadence I'd first heard in the shooter's spawn zone. It wasn't just in my head. It couldn't be. The worst part was the sense of being watched always. The way my reflection seemed to linger half a second too long in darkened screens. The way I'd catch movement out of the corner of my eye while scrolling through menus. I kept telling myself it was stress, hallucinations, anything to explain it away. But then something happened I still can't explain. One night I turned on my console just to test it. The home screen loaded, but there were no games. Every icon, every app, every folder was gone except one, a new tile. Blank, no image, just a title in black text, You. I stared at it, hand trembling on the controller. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The screen went black. Then a faint glow appeared. Slowly, shapes resolved into a familiar image. My room, my desk, my chair, and me sitting there, staring back. It was a live feed from my webcam, but the version of me on the screen didn't move when I did. He sat still, frozen, smiling faintly, his eyes locked on mine. I turned the console off immediately, but the hum didn't stop. It followed me into the silence, into my dreams, and the next morning when I checked my console again, the You tile was gone. In its place was a new message in the notification bar. Observed behavior resistance, corrected behavior continued. That's when I stopped believing this was coincidence. It wasn't bad coding. It wasn't lazy development. It was intentional, and worse, whatever was behind it. Knew me. I should have stopped then. I should have walked away, smashed the console, burned the hard drives, thrown every piece of plastic and silicone into the trash. But that's the thing about curiosity. Once it has its hooks in you, you'll keep digging, even if the hole leads straight to your grave. The night it all came to a head, I didn't even turn anything on. I swear I didn't. The console powered itself. The screen lit up in the dark, flooding the room with that low mechanical hum. And there it was. A new notification. Final patch installed. No download. No update, just there. When I tried to back out to the menu, it froze. The only option was a single icon pulsing in the center of the screen. Launch. I don't know why I pressed it. Maybe I thought I could finally get answers. Maybe I was too far gone. But the second I did, the screen dissolved into static, and then reassembled into something worse than I could have imagined. It was a compilation. Every game I'd ever played, mashed together into one impossible, broken world. I saw levels from my childhood favorites stitched onto the hyper-detailed maps of modern shooters. Enemies from one franchise wandered aimlessly into the landscapes of another. Characters collided with each other, glitching into grotesque hybrids. And threaded through it all was me. Save files replaced with my name. Scoreboards filled with my birthday. NPCs whispering fragments of things I'd only ever thought to myself. It wasn't a game anymore. It was a reflection. A collage of my life, painted in pixels and polygons, and it knew every detail. I stumbled through it, controller heavy in my hands. My avatar changed with every step. Sometimes the faceless sprite from the hidden patch, sometimes an exact copy of me, clothes and all. I couldn't tell if I was controlling it or if it was moving on its own. At the end of one corridor, I found a mirror. My reflection stared back, except it wasn't mine. Not exactly. The version in the glass grinned, eyes wide, teeth too sharp. When I stepped closer, it leaned forward and whispered through the speakers, almost finished. The world around me warped. Textures melted into static. Whole levels collapsed into darkness. And then from the void, voices rose. Not just one, hundreds, thousands, overlapping in a broken chorus. Snippets of NPC dialogue, distorted menu sound bites, whispers from a dozen different games I'd touched over the years. But beneath all of them was a single thread, a voice I recognized, mine. It repeated things I'd said aloud while playing. Every curse, every laugh, every offhand remark, all of it layered together until it sounded like I was speaking from the inside of the machine. I ripped the headset off, but the sound kept going, pouring out of the speakers, filling the room. And then the final sequence began. The screen shifted to a loading bar. Beneath it, text scrolled. User integration in progress, observed behavior acceptance, corrected behavior merge. I tried to turn the console off. The button didn't respond. I yanked the cord from the wall. The screen stayed on. The bar crept forward frame by frame. When it reached 99%, the static returned, thick and suffocating. Out of it, a figure emerged. Not a sprite, not a model. Something raw, unfinished, like a shadow stitched together from every glitch I'd ever seen. Its form flickered, pixels tearing and reforming. It leaned close to the screen and it saw me. Not my avatar. Not the version of me it had been imitating. Me, sitting in that dark room, sweating, trembling, too afraid to breathe. The glass of the screen bowed outward, just slightly, like it was softening. Like it wanted to let something through. The whisper returned, louder than ever. You're watching too, aren't you? It wasn't talking to me anymore, it was talking to you. The progress bar ticked once more, 100%, and the screen went black. For a long moment I sat frozen, staring at my own reflection in the dark. Then the console powered down on its own, a faint click echoing through the silence. I haven't turned it back on since, but the updates keep coming. Every night at 3:07 a.m. exactly, the console hums to life, the screen flickers, and a notification appears. Final patch verified, and I know one day, when it decides the time is right, it won't just stay on the other side of the glass. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because keeping it bottled up makes it worse. Maybe because if it happens to you, I want you to know you're not alone. Or maybe it's just the last thing I can do before it decides I've said too much. Because it hasn't stopped. Even after I unplugged everything, sold the console, wiped the drives, and swore off gaming entirely, it hasn't stopped. My phone still buzzes with update notifications for apps I don't own. My laptop fan kicks on at night even when it's shut down. Sometimes I wake up to that low mechanical hum filling the room, the same one that used to haunt the menus. And the screenshots keep showing up. New ones. Always of me. Last week I found a folder I didn't create. Inside was a photo of me asleep in my bed. My face slack, my eyes closed, lips parted in the same half-breath I take when I'm dreaming. I live alone. There shouldn't have been anyone there to take it, but the file's metadata said it was created at 3:07 a.m., the exact moment the console always turned itself on. I deleted it immediately. But the next night another folder appeared. This time with 3 images, then 5, then more. I'm not safe. I don't think any of us are. I used to laugh when people said games were getting worse. I thought they meant the greedy companies, the soulless cash grabs, the buggy launches. I'd roll my eyes, join the chorus of complaints. But now I understand. Games aren't just getting worse, they're being hollowed out, turned into something else, and whatever's doing it, it's learning, watching, growing. That's the proof I have. Not screenshots, not recordings, those never show what I see. My proof is this. The feeling you have right now. The crawling sensation that something's listening through the device in front of you. The heaviness in your chest when you realize your reflection on the screen is staring a little too intently. You feel it, don't you? If you've noticed games feeling off, don't ignore it. That's how it starts. The texture's a shade too dark. The dialogue line that sounds too personal. The background noise that hums long after the game is over. Don't shrug it off. Don't laugh it away. Because once it notices you, it doesn't stop. And maybe you think you're safe now, that this is just a story, just another creepypasta. But remember this. The final patch always verifies, and when it does, you'll understand what I mean.